Hello, and welcome to the Contemporary American Theater Festival Unmuted series. In the segment that follows, you will meet one of the playwrights from the repertory in an interview with Ed Herendeen, our founder and producing director. This playwright interview is with Caridad Svich, the writer of USHUAIA Blue. Enjoy watching.
It's my pleasure to introduce you to my new colleague, who I met for the first time in the fall when we started reading through and working together on this play, Caridad Svich. Welcome.
Hi, Caridad. It's great to see you. Thanks. So before you all start your conversation, we really want to hear what the audience thought and what was sort of compelling or surprising to them about seeing a scene with two different sort of compositions and soundscapes. So if anybody out there would like to share their thoughts, raise your hand, and Nicole will do it. We have a lot of things that came into the chat room, but we really do want to hear from you about what you thought about seeing those two different scenes. Nicole, do you have any raised hands? Yeah, okay, Nicole.
Yeah, it looks like we have Faith Kirk.
All right, Faith.
Hi.
There you are. Hi, Faith. There you are.
There I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
That both of them were unbelievably compelling. It just drew you into his words. It made the sound even more exciting. And I would have a hard choice picking between the two. Each one of them,
sure.
You know, I think that would have to be something that would have to be spent a little bit more time on, perhaps seeing how it worked in, you know, in more of the play. But wow, I can't wait to be there next year.
All right, that's it. Thank you, Faith. We're so happy you're here. Nicole, do we have any other responses? Yes.
All right, so it looks like I've got Daniel again, if you wanted to ask your question, Daniel, and then I've got one more person after that.
Well, not exactly a question, but I heard the soundtrack in a very different way. True, the monologue is so effective that you have to pay attention to the soundtrack, but the first one, before he starts to talk, sounds like a ship. And it makes me feel like I'm on the water going through the ice. I don't need to be told that the wind is blowing and things like that and the ice cracking, because I can already feel it. And it kept on going like that and building up to the scene in USHUAIA for me.
Great. That's great. Good. We have one more, you said, Nicole?
Yes, I think it's Ray or Rye Wilson. Ree Wilson?
It's Ree Wilson, yes. We know Ree. Hey, Ree, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I have been to USHUAIA and got on a ship there to go to Antarctica. So this, I'm very excited about this play for many, many reasons. Having been there and knowing that climate change is having such an adverse effect on it is haunting. And I do think the first music gave a bit of hope. I think someone else said this. The latter, a little more haunting. So I guess it kind of depends on what direction do you, as the playwright, feel it should go.
That's great. So that leads us right into our conversation with the playwright. Thank you, Ree. And so, yes, what's cool about this moment right now, y'all, you got to understand what you're experiencing, is that Caridad heard these yesterday. And so we're really going to hear a conversation with the playwright and the director as they talk about the sort of compelling moments of these scenes and what works, and as you said, what kind of helps support the storytelling. So Ed and Caridad?
Yeah, so it's really, to have this amount of time, we will spend the rest of the year working very closely together with Caridad and I, and with Broken Chord and David and Aaron, In fact, I'm really looking forward to being in the studio with everyone in New York when we're really exploring Argentinian guitar music for some of it and some of the other ideas. But this was a great way to sort of bring you into it, to engage you with the process that goes on in making a play. Caridad, we talked a little bit about your experience hearing. Of course, we talked a lot about this with Aaron, and now you got to hear 3 minutes, a total of 6 minutes, 3 different minutes. Do you want to share any compelling emotions or feelings or ideas that struck you when you heard it again today?
Yes. Hi, Ed. First of all, I just want to make sure that you can hear me all, because I know before it was a little bit of an issue. So, I hope I'm coming through okay. Great to, great to hear fellow collaborators diving into the material and responding to it. My initial reaction yesterday, and it still remains, I think, is that I think it might be a mixture of the two for me. Elements from the first, but I'm foregrounding the second right now in terms of the soundscape and composition. But I think there are just some little things about what's happening in the first composition soundscape that might be threaded through maybe subterranean into the second. But it's also like thinking about what the larger scope of the compositional work is going to be for the entire show, and how we're going to build motifs that will reappear, so that there's an aspect of storytelling, what I call emotional storytelling, that's also happening throughout the show. So I think that this opening monologue, we're sort of laying down kind of some of the themes and variations, as it were, musically, that we might be exploring later. So including the connection to the natural world, of course, and the way we're going to hear the play as well as experience it and see it.
Yeah, that's great. Because we talked a lot about, the climate, and I'll ask you about climate grief in a minute. But I do want everyone to know that what's really, when we first met, and we talked a lot about, this is a play that's in different time periods. It's a present. We're in the present in the natural world. We also go back to the past, the way you're writing. I mean, and this monologue brings all of that in, and even to what we call coma time, because Jordan, who you saw, Tom Reed, is his wife, Sarah, who's also a scientist, is in a coma due to an accident that she had on the ice. So in many ways, for me, this is a love story. Well, you've written a love story. You've written a play with a big, big, big idea of climate grief. And you've also explored what the world of, and why a metaphor of coma is important to you, and the past, what happens, because we'll meet a character that's a descendant to the Yagan tribe that lived before white people showed up in Argentina. Talk a little bit about this climate grief. I know from everything that you send me almost on a weekly basis, you may be one of the most well-read climate crisis people that I've known. You're in grief, Caridad. You shared that with me. You're in grief for the planet. You've moved on to a different stage. You've moved out of anger and you're in climate grief. Do you want to share some of that with us?
Sure. I mean, I think that climate grief is something that we may be all experiencing in different ways. I think the acknowledgement around the fact that human-made systems, and specifically ones that are tied to environmental racism, have created the situation that we're in on the planet, where there actually is little time left. I mean, if you're looking at the science, yesterday there was something around, by 2030, if some things don't change, we're basically heading down a very steep roller coaster of the kind of stuff that we're experiencing now during the pandemic, but times 10 or times 100, right? So I feel like to be in grief is a natural is a natural state to be in response to this condition we're in. I think that also grief allows us to reckon with things, and I think that anger is like a very useful political emotion. But sometimes it stays in one place necessarily. You know, it kind of plateaus. And I think that when you move past and through rage and anger, move into grief and reckoning, it's the place of reckoning that actually, I think allows for action to occur. So I think because you have to reckon with your own soul, and you have to sort of reckon with your connection to fellow humans and animals and the air and the earth. And that connection is one that's connected to deep listening and collective listening. And I'm very interested in this notion of, a concept of listening to the earth and listening to what the earth is telling us, and including in all its volatility, and that act of listening actually allowing us to make changes at local levels and national levels and global levels around saving this planet that we're on, and not continuing to be complicit in systems that ravage it and ravage us.
And you know what struck home, even watching it, for several times, but watching it even today, this is the first monologue, the first moment of the play in which all of that happens. She's in a coma, Sarah's in a coma, and Jordan is hoping, will she wake up in time? The audience, I hope, will be on the edge of their seat throughout the play saying, will Sarah wake up? You might be saying to us in the writing, will we, as a world, wake up in time? Are we in a coma? Are we in denial? Will we wake up in time for the earth? I just think it's such powerful poetry, and I'm convinced that this is the play, this is one of 6 plays that we must be doing at this point today, and I'm thrilled to be able to go on this journey with you and with all the other collaborators that are going to be joining us to bring live theater back to Shepherdstown and then launch this play, which I hope will have staying power throughout the American theater industry. So, Caridad, thank you for writing it. Thank you. Peggy.
Let's take one quick question or comment from the audience. So do we have anybody raising their hand who would like to ask Caridad a question about either the scene or the composition or the play or climate grief? Nicole, I'm looking at you. Nope. How about comments in the chat box? Do we have anything that we want to share there? We saw a lot of great comments coming up on the screen. Okay, we have a hand here. Nicole's getting ready to.
All right, Graham, if you want to join us.
Hi, Graham. Hi, Graham.
Well, hi, everybody. You look so different all masked. Hey.
Yes.
Hey, but it's
we're hot.
Yeah, I bet. It's the eyes that tell the story, though, right?
Yeah.
Hey, so I'm just curious what you learned writing this play. For me, the adventure is always learning about new stuff, and I'm just curious, what new discoveries did you have in this process?
It started with, I was interviewing Professor James McClintock, who teaches at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And he's a polar marine biologist and climate change scientist. So it started with the conversations with him. And then, a lot of the conversations were around his research, but also around just daily life at Palmer Station in Antarctica, and also daily life at the university where he teaches and, works with students and fellow scientists around issues of sustainability and resilience. And I also asked him questions around, his favorite music and more quotidian and mundane things, I suppose. But I wanted to have sort of enough in my pot that I could kind of sit with it for a while and build something. From those interviews, I then kind of went away and thought about what kind of play I wanted to write. And I knew that I didn't I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to write verbatim or docu-play, that I really wanted to write fiction but use kind of things that are in the world, right, to sort of ground the play. And I really wanted to write a love story. I hadn't written one in a long time, and I just felt like, romantic, like, people to people love story. And so that came pretty quickly into the writing process. And then the idea of coma time, dream time, and coma is something that I've been wanting to write also for ages and ages. And I hadn't found the right container for it. Sometimes you sit with ideas as a writer, maybe for 10 years or 20 sometimes, and if you're so lucky, and you just don't know where that idea belongs. And as I was working on this play, I was like, oh, this is where this idea that I've been wanting to kind of articulate in the play finally fits, and it's felt like the metaphor crystallized, in terms of what I was building. And so, yeah, the discoveries around, for me, were around, I actually didn't know exactly. I mean, it's funny, you may not think this when you read the play on New Play Exchange, but the play didn't start with the idea of like the accident in my mind. Like I knew there was an accident somewhere, but I didn't know exactly where it would happen. And then as I was building the play, that became central. And also the life, the play exists in three kind of what I call Souths. So part of the play is set in a small southern town, maybe Alabama, maybe not. And then the other part is in Ushuaia, Argentina. And then in Antarctica. So this notion of these three Souths speaking to each other, I love this idea of like the American South, in a kind of more, in terms of its register, linguistically, that American South was speaking to the global South, what we think of as the global South, which is the furthest point you can get. And I think that the conversation doesn't happen that often on stage. And so I think that was like one of the key discoveries in writing the play for me, actually, was in stuff that's been in my writing for a long time. I've written Southern plays a lot. A part of my imagination is sort of lives in the South. So I think that, especially in the Gulf region, and so it was interesting to finally have an opportunity as a writer, through the serendipity of many things that were happening in the making of the play, to have a conversation between the American South and the South that's right there in South America, way down there. So yeah, and I think politically that's a conversation that rarely happens. So I was interested both from a political standpoint, but also in terms of larger geopolitical concerns, but also around climate change and climate grief.
Thank you, Caridad.
Sure.
Let me ask you the same question, if you were watching the panel with the directors. How is this moment in our lifetime now, where we stand as artists, where we stand as a country, where we stand as a society, where we stand as a world, the world events, the tragic national events that are going on? How does this moment change you? Does it change you? How will it change you? What kind of thoughts? Because you and I have talked a lot. You've been stuck in your apartment near Union Square in New York City. How is everything that's happening affecting you as an artist?
Oh my, yes. Well, so many things. I mean, for one thing, for writers, I think it's an interesting. Our normal tends to be like being at home, staring at the computer, making things sometimes. So there's a part of this that feels very familiar, just in terms of the conditions. It just means that it's heightened. I think that we have been. I mean, I think that's interesting. I think that this moment, this sort of historical moment that we're in around COVID, but also around the calling out or the presence of the reawakening, I would say, of speaking to systemic racism and deep inequalities and class divides that exist in our country, but also globally as these conversations are building. Our conversations have been happening for a very, very long time. And I think now they're sort of at a tipping point. And I think that because of the situation we're in, I think that what happens sometimes in lockdown situations are moments where you are being asked to, as humans, just to center the humanity for a second, but not exclusively, is to again, as I said earlier, about reckoning. So you sort of are forced to face things that on a daily basis, as the directors were saying earlier, you're kind of rushing through life and you're kind of doing things, and a part of your brain is like, of course, thinking about larger issues, but sometimes when you have to stop in your tracks, then it's like, oh, okay, here's where we are. So I feel like that's just been heightened. I think that as an artist, it's a very interesting time, to put it mildly, because I feel like there's a lot of push-pull. There's a lot of, what should I, the question that I think a lot of my colleagues are asking, or in private conversations that we have with each other is, and not telling tales out of school, but it's, we're like, oh, what should we be making right now? Like, what's going to happen? What should we be doing? And, and I totally get that. Like, I feel like oh my God, we have to write the big important thing. I also feel like, what? We have to write what we love. And I think that writing comes out of love and healing. It's a healing practice. And so I think that sometimes when you write and you start with oh, this is an important thing that I must be making, it actually can stop you as an artist from actually listening to your heartbeat and writing what needs to be written. So I feel like this is a time also to, as artists, to be thinking about, what is moving us? Why is a story compelling and urgent, and why tell it, and how can we tell it, and what are the shapes that we can tell it in? And I'm a big proponent of digital theater. I have been for like 15 years, so I'm particularly excited by the digital environment and issues of access with audience, but also access in different ways that it makes possible, like moments like these. Also, it feels like a much more intimate environment in some ways. I'm in your home. So I think that those things are really exciting to me as an artist. And also I would say that I will say that the phrase, that's been bandied about a lot, has been, oh, we'll see you on the other side, or when we come back. And it was like, we're actually here. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like, let's acknowledge that we're all here together. And I feel like, to me, that's a powerful thing. And sometimes it means making art like for your neighbors, or for strangers online, or for, like, there are different ways of making art, for one thing. And I think so that's what excites me. And of course I'm worried about like everything, including the election, but presidential election. But I feel like I'm a creative optimist. So I lead with kind of hope, because I think writing is a hopeful act. You think someone somewhere will read it, and someone somewhere may connect with it, so I'm trying to stay true to that. And kind of, I've been tweeting about this a little bit, but I've been embracing the wilderness, what I call the wilderness of writing. And I feel like, to me, in the wilderness is actually in that place that's very, very, quote, other, way far out there. Sometimes some magic can happen. So that's what I'm trying to tune into, and hoping I can stay focused and healthy and energized to do that. And also knowing that both as an educator and as a fellow collaborator, that we're all experiencing multiple levels of trauma right now. And that's not going to be easily resolved anytime soon.
I'm glad to hear you say hope and healing, though. So that's encouraging right now too. Thank you. I look forward to you and I continuing our journey to USHUAIA together and making this play and working with all the collaborators. I think we're about ready to wrap up the program, so let me turn it over to Peggy McCowan, and she'll lead us to how we go
Yes.
from here.
I just want to say thank you again, Caridad, for sharing with us, and for all of our audience who participated and enjoyed this. And look at her, think theater water bottle. Yes. All right.